Okay, good afternoon. Our group has been developing research about tourism and tourist infrastructure that affect the city of Madrid. Madrid is shifting from a model of territorial expansion where housing developments are taking the outskirts of the city towards a model of core consumptions where other functions more related to tourism and consumption of the city, like hotels and shopping, are developing and taking over the inner core of the city. We assisted to a trend in the latest decade where the hotel capacity in Madrid has been increasing a lot. And there are a number of projects that nowadays are tending to adapt existing historic building in the town center to the hotel functions. We see a lot of foreign investments in this kind of developments. And the city, we can say, is shifting from a model of everyday life city, a more continuous and intelligible city, towards a model of city of objects, disconnected to one another and more discontinuous. In fact, we see that hotels in Madrid are never completely full, and they're affected by a strong seasonality, especially in August. In summer, some of them are forced to close. The same tendency can be detected on a weekly basis, where we have weekends where hotels are pretty much empty. Sorry. This is affecting also the labor market, which became more unstable and fragile. This can be explained also looking at the structure and restructuring of the hotel organization from one entity concentrating all the various functions to a disconnection between the various entities that are fragmented and they tend to outsource the different functions. This is also affecting the condition of the workers, which have been more precarious as they have been outsourced. This fragility is also dependent from the air transportation, like Iberia, which is decreasing its flights to Madrid, and also the hotels and the lodging infrastructure are affected by this. But we ask if Madrid really needs more hotels. We've been interviewing an expert in the sector, and he said that even in a scenario of Olympic Games, Madrid wouldn't need to increase its hotel capacity. Especially because we are seeing that there are other kinds of lodging infrastructure which are non-material and networked and non-regulated that are taking the space of the traditional ones, which tend to polarize between luxury hotels and budget hotels, but all the middle, the average, let's say the average ones are being substituted by these new kind of platforms like Airbnb or Couchsurfing, for example.
Okay, so is this reality arriving to the domestic space? Can we say the lodging logic is infiltrating the domestic space? And also, can we find the logic within these two models? Next one, please. People in other cities, like New York, are already feeling a strong impact. These are also cases like Berlin. In New York City, people are already organizing to decide what to do with this new reality. This is in fact a website called Inside Airbnb, which tries to make visible what is already happening in New York with Airbnb. In fact, the growth of Airbnb has been much bigger than traditional hotels in last year, so we can say we are having a real impact. Next one, please. It definitely implies a different approach to how the lodging gets into the city, involving more an informal logic than the massive buildings operations we have been seeing. Because in fact, Airbnb is completely a non-asset enterprise. Airbnb doesn't own a single bed. Not only people are organizing regarding Airbnb new reality, next one please, but also another platforms like Couchsurfing already propose a way to organize and have an impact on the built environment. Next one please. Next one, please. In the case specifically of Airbnb, we have found that this platform has had, over the last years, an amazing growth in Madrid. Only in city center, we can find today almost 1,000 accommodation. Around 10% of some parts of Madrid centers home are being used by Airbnb. Next. Also, Couchsurfing, as an unmonetized platform, works as a network of existing domesticity on a bigger scale. should we ask ourselves, how are these domestic network spaces relating to the city? Next one, please. Also, hybrid logics like BMate are appearing. This platform, BMate, involves non-adset lodgings like Airbnb, and also adds amenities from standard hotels. Next one, please. So, this sharing economy has apparently two models, one which is monetized and one unmonetized, like couchsurfing, which infiltrates the domestic space without an exchange of any kind. In couchsurfing, next one please. In couchsurfing model, the relation with the community changes as you become a guest and not a tenant. In this model, the inhabitants and guest preference, identity, and so on, become sometimes much more important than the space itself. So, regarding these facts, maybe we should ask ourselves, which is the value of our homes? Next one, please. Which maybe isn't exactly the same as our home price. So we're trying to look closely to the price Airbnb defines of our home. Next one, please. Each characteristic has a predefined monetary price. Maybe having exterior light or heating is a plus. Maybe having kids or not having an elevator diminishes the price. So the Airbnb model implies that actually the tourist is cohabitating in local communities. This brings out obviously a more close cultural relationship, but at the same time possible conflicts and potentialities. Conflicts meaning as encountered with the other also, which implies generating debate and helping see things from a different perspective. This characteristic gets to a graphic level when we look at the typical photos presented in both websites. Airbnb showing empty spaces in kind of professional photography, while couchsurfing showing standard pictures full of people actually using their domestic spaces.
Just as a conclusion of our research, we wanted to make some statements, like some proposals. For example, we actually think that Madrid doesn't need any more hotels, especially in the inner core of the city. All these buildings that nowadays are being developed for lodging infrastructure, they could be thought in another way, especially using people's participation in the process, which we notice with our field study that is essential. This is like a vision for one of them. Is a building in Calle de Montera, where a square that could be used for a mix of different uses, more temporary and more related to the social uses that Madrid is really lacking, especially in these areas that are being gentrified more and more because of excessive tourism. This is another proposal, intervening in the gap which is left in the seasonality of the occupation of the hotel. We know that most of the hotels are not full all year long and all week long, and they could be rethought on a temporary basis for non-permanent use, which can fill the gap of hotel use.
And also we are interested in finding ways to make visible this reality, proposing this kind of prothesis, which makes possible new communal uses. One, for example, proposes a place for a communal productive garden, which also makes visible in the urban space these already existing social connections.
Okay, just a final note. We were using the layout of a postcard, which is very practical for storytelling and for raising questions. And the next step of our research will be printing these postcards, going to the field, and where we've been also interviewing some people, and distributing and asking questions about the possibilities that are in the city as a starting point for our participative process, let's say. Thank you.
The video. Okay. You want to comment? You can put it in background.
¿Tienes conocimiento de los grandes proyectos que se van a hacer aquí por la Comunidad de Madrid?
No.
Sí, algo leí en la prensa.
nuestro Madrid tiene bonito, entonces yo no sé hasta qué punto reformarlo hace que cambie lo que es.
Si se ocupan, sí.
Lo que pasa es que podrían dedicarlo a otros usos, no sé.
Porque ahora con la moda de Airbnb la gente se va.
También creo que es para buscar sofás o algo así.
No, de eso no conozco nada.
Pero todo esto tirando para eso, igual por ejemplo con los coches se puede hablar para ir a cualquier lugar, porque ahora con el internet y la conectividad y todo, yo creo que eso me parece súper interesante.
La casa de alguien que...
Hombre, yo creo que hoy en día la gente prefiere hoteles tradicionales.
¿Estarías dispuesto a compartir tu espacio privado, dar servicios a los turistas a cambio de dinero?
Mi casa no.
Bueno, si lo pagan bien.
No sé, yo creo que sí, de repente sí.
¿Sí?
Me atrevería, yo creo que sí.
¿Qué te parecería si esos grandes edificios de infraestructura se utilizaran para otra cosa? ¿Qué uso propondrías en vez de hotel?
Hombre, pues podrían ser espacios más bien compartidos.
Me gustaría mucho, porque a veces, por ejemplo, yo quiero estudiar, no sé, buscar en televisión, me tengo que ir a las afueras de Madrid. Digo, ¿por qué no puedo venir yo y tener una oficina aquí en el casco antiguo?
Sí, pero son privados. La gente lo destina a lo que quiera. Aquí para lavar dinero.
Más zonas verdes, digamos, algún parking más.
Pienso que se le podía dar un uso cultural al edificio, no solo hoteles. No sé exactamente qué, pero es un uso para que lo disfruten los habitantes de